Peaceful greetings, everyone, and welcome to the final book study on Yurugu, an African-centered critique of European cultural thought and behavior. And today we are covering the conclusion. Yurugu, the incomplete being. Getting started, I have to read this quote by Arma, and it states, "It was not always so. The desert was made the desert, turned barren by a people whose spirit is itself the seed of death. Each single one of them is a carrier of destruction. The spirit of their coming together, the purpose of their existence is the spread of death over all the earth. An insatiable urge drives them." Arma. Very significant quote as far as to what I've just learned from this book and what it means to be European/white. Would anyone like to share some beginning thoughts on the conclusion?
Yeah, I was gonna ask to read that part, but hearing it is very, very significant. That information is something that I would like to understand, and it kind of leads into the despiritualization of planet Earth and the attempts to whole universe, because that's what the goal is. It's this insatiable need to dominate and kill and create creatures of non-white people. But yeah, amazing quote. Very to me, that quote is the entire reason for Europeans existing. Like, it makes, when you apply logic, when you historically look at European behavior since their beginning, you just see these cycles of extreme violence and extreme aggression. And so it makes sense that they're planet destroyers, of their beings sent here to, create death, to manifest death. And that's why all their films are about killing, and there's all these movies about, a white male can kill 20,000 people with an AK-47, shooting non-white people. There's little films called Universal Soldier, where a white male travels to all these different islands and kills non-white people. So yeah, it's just really significant way to begin the discussion on Yurugu, the incomplete being.
And one of the things that stood out, literally, that just like wrapped everything up for me, was this one sentence on 567, where it says, "Europe is the cultural home of a people who identify as one race, banding together for survival and destruction of others." And that, I kid you not, when I read that, I was just like, just wrapped it up. I was already almost just like, I'm already in shock that we finished the book. So I think when I got to that sentence, that's what I was just like looking for the entire time, was just like, just give me one sentence that just like, just wraps everything up. And it's just that sentence, I don't know, it makes me feel some type of way. I can't really identify that feeling yet, because I'm not sure if it's just like, not like mad, but almost like a relief, like finally someone has just said it. Even though we've read in other books as well that they just say it as well, but it's just like, I waited for this book to just like, let's just wrap everything up with the asili, and then also just going through each of the things, like each of the words that were created throughout this book in the conclusion, and then wrapping it up with, let me just make it plain and simple for everyone. even a seventh grader could read this, or even someone in elementary school could read this one sentence and understand what this book was about. So I really liked that, because I also really enjoyed how this book had a lot of, like, I call them, I don't want to say academic words, but words that I learned in school. That's the only way how I know the words in this book. So that one sentence didn't have really too many of those, like, what I call academic words. So it was just plain and simple, and I just really enjoyed it. Thank you.
This is Kwaku. For the conclusion, Yurugu, the Incomplete Being, basically a grand summary of the entire book, going from chapter 1, the culture of structuring of thought, chapter 2, religion and ideology, the power of symbols, self-image, image of others, rhetoric and behavior, intercultural behavior, behavior towards others, progress as ideology, and the idea of universalism. Really, what all of those sum up, the total sum of those create this incomplete being, the Yurugu. And I just thought that the conclusion was really a great summary of the entire book. Really good. She really goes into detail. She's very the sentences and the words that she used are powerful, to say the least, and really provide a grand understanding of the incomplete being, who they are, what they are, and why given the culture that they've created, they can never be complete.
Very well said, Sir Nanaya and Kwaku. Thank you. I want to read the mythos of the Yurugu from the Dogon people from 556, where it states Yurugu, originally named Ogo, is described in Dogon mythology as acting with anxiety and impatience. He is incessantly restless in search of the secrets of Ama, the creative principle, of which he wants to gain possession. He is known for his aggressiveness and incompleteness. He is in a state of solitude, having been deprived of his female principle. He is also impotent. When Yurugu, the pale fox, reaches his final form of development, he is the permanent element of disorder in the universe, the agent of disorganization. He was marked from birth for failure to remain forever incomplete, to search perpetually for his female principle. He is not only the agent of cosmic disorder, but also psychological individualization. And this is really profound and quite evident if we truly study the behavior of white people. And I think it's really interesting that when I compare this legend to white mythology, there's this white mythology involving before, I think this came from the white Greeks, but it involves all the men like living together in heaven and being able to frolic with one another. And then when they were brought fire by Prometheus, they were punished by Zeus by being introduced to women. Like he put women in heaven with them. And so comparing this with their lack of their search for female principle, like it makes a lot of sense, because there's two different separate mythos that separate them from their so-called other half in some way, shape, or form. So I thought that was really, really interesting.
Yeah, agreed. I wanted to comment on that section as well. The lack of their feminine component, it shows in European society and all Western societies, there's this notion of like there's a lot of rhetoric about women not being suitable for like leadership or respect, and women are treated really poorly due to the behavior patterns that Europeans produce and project and encourage. And there's a lot of women female hate basically and misogyny, and that is one of the reasons why Yurugu is Yurugu, because they have their understanding of women is anti-women. There's a lot of mythology where women are the bad people or the bad entities that corrupt men and drive men to insanity or drive men to kill. And that's also in their writings. I'm pretty sure Macbeth is about a white female convincing her husband, who was a king, to murder everyone who steps in her way. And whenever it's about the white male and the the white male and the white female getting together, sometimes it ends in death and tragedy, like Romeo and Juliet. So they do not respect their women, nor do they value them. And said earlier, that's why they are Yurugu, incomplete beings. Yeah.
Very well said.
This is Kwaku again. I thought that was such a powerful quote, because it shows that not that the Yurugu is something that has been accounted for, that is something that has been prophesized and, I guess, in a sense predicted, that this being does exist and that they will exist. The question really is how do you deal with this being? You know that this being is here, you know that their qualities, so how do you deal with them? And I think that by giving the characteristics that she's shown, I think that majority world's people kind of messed up in the beginning by not realizing that this is exactly who this person is, and who and what their goals are. So I think for me, the answer to what do you do with this being is, realize the asili, realize the driving force, realize their goals, and really not participate, and don't be fooled again. I think, because for them to have kind of predicted this and prophesized this, and us to see this being in its physical form and how it operates, I think that this text is wonderful. She mentioned in the previous chapter about creating the concept of asili for us, so that we don't fall victim to it again. So I think, yeah.
Yeah, I have to say that I really enjoyed reading this part as well, because the fact that it can, just as Ray said earlier about the earlier sentence, I believe also this sentence of the impatience and restlessness and how it forces them to a solitude and individualization. It's like that, it makes sense with this information how we are seeing what we're seeing. Like, as confusing and as frustrating as what we experience is, having this knowledge, it arms us in a way that you can almost predict what's coming if you are in a certain scenario from our past experiences. And now with this knowledge, now we can now maneuver around, of course, combined with reading other essential books like the Code Book by Neely Fuller, we can basically, we have the tools. These are the tools, and I'm grateful for Dr. Marimba Ani for this information, because it's just helping to solidify that and bring it all together, along with Dr. Francis Cress Wilson. And yeah, so just like they were saying, okay, I'll leave that for another time, because I was going to talk about the Dr. Francis Cress Wilson Institute and how hearing information there really helps, just also 360 degrees the information that we're getting. But to come back to the topic, that quote to me also speaks to a very quick and easy way to just understand who you're dealing with and be able to it predicts the behavior, anticipate when we are forced into interactions with them, especially as we are going to be doing in our just to maneuver in society at this moment until we organize properly. But yeah, that's all I have to say for that statement. But moving forward to despiritualization, I wanted to just read just a little bit below the previous statement was just reading. Bear with me. Perhaps we should begin with despiritualization of the world and its effects on our day-to-day life. This is meant in an existential, ontological sense, not in a strict theological sense. In essence, Europeans have denied themselves the possibility of transcendence. This is central because many of their creations are explicable as surrogates for transcendence. The objective becomes that of attaining a sense of divine and awareness of the sacred dimension, the experience of eternality. Sorry, I can't say eternality, which implies the suspension of ordinary time and a profane sense of profane space, along with the capacity to exceed the boundaries of conceptual limited ego, abstract concepts of thoughts, conceptual absolute. The syntax of universalism become the means of which they are able to achieve the illusion of transcendence. But this culture forecloses on the consequences of faith and love, while inhabiting the precondition, i.e. spirituality. The universe loses its richness as it is transformed into lifeless matter. The spiritual is reduced to the natural, which means to them the merely biological or physical. Consequently, time only can be linear, space and three-dimensional, and material causality and the ultimate reality. I'm going to stop there because I could keep going, because this information is so good for me. Because for everyone, it reads on to say that there's no middle ground for spirit and humanity and spirit. They don't meet on a middle ground. And then I instantly thought of the Michelangelo painting of just like the human and their god just about touching the tips of their fingers, and there is no middle ground there. It's in their cultural present, what they've preserved in their culture. It says this, just as Dr. Marimba Ani says that their asili is self-imposing, it speaks on itself, it shows it there, whereas we can see it as eternal. It seems like they're constantly at this never-ending reach, and what they reverence high in art, and then we now marvel over, is really just a decoding for their anxiety and insecurities of not being able to meet that spiritual connection.
Wow, that was cool. I never thought about that. I feel like tools for decoding the culture, and especially the thought systems of the system of racism, white supremacy. I came across this on 557, where they talk about rationalism and its ascendance to the position of the dominant cultural mode, and that the activity of knowing is a means of experiencing power. So therefore, definitions are very important. Naming, identifying, and delineating things conceptualizes them as claimed objects, a part of the empire. It is made to fit in the system, and that the knower controls the definition he or she gives it. And it made me think of the United Independent Compensatory Approach, where victims of racism are encouraged to make their own definitions within the system and to make compensatory definitions that enable them to think and understand the system better. So I feel like this is where Fuller's, it demonstrates the depth of the approach of Fuller's thinking in the code book. It coincides with Marimba Ani. And I saw a video of Dr. Ani when she was given a remembrance of Dr. Walton. And she mentioned that she was going to begin reading the code book. So she had not come across Dr. Fuller's work in the code book and the importance of giving definitions. So that for me, that it makes both their statements even more valid, that they came to it independently. That's it for me.
Thank you, everyone. I think there's so many passages that express what the Yurugu has done to themselves in terms of their lack of spirit and ability to transcend. And I looked up the word transcendence. I looked it up on dictionary, and it's supposed to just mean being able to experience outside of the mind and body. So whatever that means. But page 558, 558, it states, in terms of the reality that transcends the system, of course, the spirit is there and it suffers, contorts, and atrophies through neglect and ignorance. It is impossible, after all, to ignore the spirit without ignoring the person. Consequently, such rationality helps to create a certain kind of person, individual. Even as Europeans seek to effectively despiritualize their surroundings, they are aware of the spiritual aspect of existence. But given the premises of their rationalistic epistemology, it must remain forever unknowable, unattainable. Spirituality represents a constant threat to the ordered system they have constructed. They therefore suffer from a chronic fear of spiritual implications. They distrust spirituality and humanness in people and in cultures. They must pretend that these phenomena do not exist and therefore are embarrassed by their manifestations. This, for instance, is why African rituals has a tendency to make Europeans uncomfortable or causes them to overreact. European science serves as the supremely valued activity, replacing religion, spiritual knowledge as a primary means by which anxiety is relieved. It succeeds only to a degree that it is able to not despiritualize the world. I think this passage can help or allow me to understand, to understand why there's this phenomenon of atheists, like white people who debate other white people about the existence of God. And this really allows you to understand that they literally have to produce many different kinds of I guess Yurugus, but it all goes back to their asili and this detachment from everything within, everything that would be able to make it attempt to exist in harmony. I think you need to have some sort of so-called spirituality to achieve some sort of balance that can be created with harmony in the world and within yourself. But if they don't have these capabilities, because they've mentally neutered themselves due to how their thinking has been programmed for many of years, it's really really interesting the sort of individual we are dealing with. And further in the conclusion, I'm gonna find it and read it eventually, but she also states why they like hate Black people, basically the darkest people on the planet, because they associate us with spirit, something they can never have or control. But yeah, well, blackness is, to say the least, which maybe is some sort of spirit, but I may be incorrect. Anyone else like to share an insight from the book?
Yeah, I wanted to comment on what Mary had read earlier, the despiritualization of the world. I think that's one of the reasons why we live right now with white supremacy operating blatantly. Of course, there's covert aspects of it, but there's way more than enough video evidence of Black people and other non-white people being mistreated by Europeans and those who have classified themselves as white. And the fact that the world is basically despiritualized, and to me, that's another way to say, in essence, somewhat dead, you know, who are very hopeless, or they're living in blissful state where they're happy, but I don't really believe in the term ignorance is bliss. I think people are just slowly losing their minds as white supremacy eats away their souls. Because that's what it's programmed to do. But back to the point what I was trying to get to is Europeans have basically destroyed what planet Earth is supposed to be like, where there's balance and something that's called harmony, and where nature was more than just the physical and biological, where nature was like the way things worked. So there's a lot of work to do, and I'm very new to the aspect of despiritualization, but when I read this part, it really clicked and how it could be sustained, how people aren't, revolting every single day. It's because their spirits are like no longer operating at a capacity where they can practice self-respect or even counter racist white suspects.
This is Kwaku. I wanted to comment on the blackness that O5 mentioned. I can't find the page it was on, but I do remember reading this and thinking that this must be where the fear of genetic annihilation comes from, that white people experience so much, due to like their inability to control melanin, to do anything about it. Sorry, I think it's on 567. But due to the Yurugu not having the ability to control melanin, I understand that brings them great anxiety, which has led them to that fear of genetic annihilation. The asili demands that they control. Oh, so on 567, sorry. It says Europe is the cultural home of a people who identify as one race, banding together for survival and destruction of others. They would destroy each other if there were not others to destroy. They fear and hate blackness, which they associate with spiritual power, a power which they can neither possess, create, nor control. So it's like a double whammy there. It's the genetic annihilation, the genetic fear of melanin, blackness, and the inability to control spirituality. So they have deemed that blackness and spirituality are one and the same, both things that they have no control over, which has led them to that, I guess, that reaction formation that Dr. Francis Cress Welsing has spoken about, and that Dr. Ani is also identifying here. So I thought that was very interesting, and it really puts genetic annihilation into perspective. Not only is it genetics, but even maybe on another subconscious level, it also has to do with spirituality. And then anybody wants to comment on that? I did want to speak about the abstract that they speak about, kind of going back to 556 on 556, where she says abstract categories of thought, conceptual absolutes, the syntax of universalism becomes the means by which they are able to achieve the illusion of transcendence. But the culture forecloses on the consequences of faith and love, while inhibiting their precondition, spirituality. The universe loses its richness as it is transformed into lifeless matter. The supernatural is reduced to the natural, which means to them the merely biological or physical. So once again, she mentions the abstraction, right? How the Yurugu uses abstract terms and doesn't really use they use abstract terms to describe this idea of transcendency. And I find it very interesting because everything that they speak about in these abstract categories, these majority people's cultures, these were things that they were actually doing, and that they're showing kindness and love, and they were practicing all of those things in their religions. But when the Yurugu came into contact with these these people, they with these cultures, they deemed that these were unvaluable, that these things were not logical, not rational. But now it seems that, every time they speak in these abstract terms for this abstract longing to transcend, they're speaking, that's exactly what they're speaking about, the things that they don't value.
Wow, very well said. Thanks for the comments. And I totally agree. They in the terms of morality is actually a really significant part regarding that right here that I wanted to share. In the States, from 559. Interculturally, there is no basis for morality. Instead, there is a merely competitive ethic. The well-being and success of each desperate self or ego is threatened by that of others. Instead of being dependent on their well-being, European social structures depend for their proper, efficient functioning on mutual aggression, distrust, and competitiveness, i.e., fundamentally hostile relationships. If love were to enter these microsystems, they would break down, but they are insured against this occurrence since they breed for code calculation and reward competitiveness and aggression. In a recent psychological test, the male personality was described as aggressive, assertive, ambitious, competitive, dominant, forceful, independent, self-reliant, while the female personality was affectionate, compassionate, gentle, loving towards children, loyal, sensitive, sympathetic, understanding, warm. Obviously, the male characteristics correspond to the European self-image. They represent those behavioral tendencies that are valued in the culture and are necessary for success in its systems. The so-called female traits are those with which the culture does not wish to identify. They are liabilities in a materialized world, all for those who are to remain in the home, but not for the leaders and breadwinners. Imbalance enters the picture. So, in the beginning of this passage, just mentioned that if love were to enter the system, it would break down, and it's because love is justice, balance between people, and this system is literally vampiric. It must feed off people. The people must serve as its subjects, as its cattle, and I think that's in the code. That could be why like most arrangements or relationships amongst people can only be tacky, because this system thrives on everyone kind of like not liking each other and everyone mistreating each other, everyone being trained to be competitive in some way, shape, or form. And yeah, we're just dealing with a really psychopathic ego that has been implanted in everyone, including the victims of racism and white supremacy. And it's really, really tragic. But I think what Kwaku says is right. Like now that we understand what we're dealing with, understand the Yurugu, the approach should be very scientific to how we deal with them. And luckily the code is very scientific and counter racism is very scientific and hopefully is a suitable tool to counter the Yurugu.
Yes, I had that part highlighted as well. So for me, it was, the male versus female, automatically enters the dichotomous thinking that is characteristic of the Yurugu. And the last part where she mentions the so-called female traits are those with which the culture does not wish to identify. They are liabilities in a materialized world, all right for those who are to remain in the home, but not for the leaders and breadwinners. Imbalance enters the picture. And that part really made me think about the ISIS papers once again, and the chapter on the black male female relationships. Is it a false problem? And like I wish that this is why Yurugu is such a necessary text, because if that chapter in the ISIS papers was already so complete, but if you just introduce the idea that your relation, the black male and female relationship isn't working because of the way that the Yurugu has trained us and conditioned us to think. I often see these I guess relationship people on YouTube, and they talk about women being submissive in the relationship and just things of that matter. When you put the action of being submissive, that means that somebody has to dominate, right? And somebody has to be controlling. And that isn't how that's a characteristic of the European relationship. That's why they don't care for each other, why they absolutely do not like each other. And I just thought I just think like as long as Black people, majority world cultures strive to mimic these relationships as to where the male is the dominant one, the breadwinner, blah blah blah, and the female is in the submissive role, the relationships will never work out, because like the Yurugu, from birth it's marked to fail.
Thank you. Anyone else like to share?
Yeah, going on page, well, just my conclusion from like page 560, where we're talking about, let me just cross check on, well, we start talking about the Utamaroho in this equilibrium. I started writing notes from, I really, like I said, I really enjoy the way that Dr. Marimba Ani talks, because it just makes you think, and then you just start putting things together in terms of like your past experiences, or just what we have to experience in general, just for growing up in European culture. And this is what I wrote, and I just want to talk about it. Expansionism is control in Euro. In the European mentality, by reinventing anything they experience in cultures. And yoga came to my mind, and we think about yoga, and we have completely removed in terms of how we look at it culturally and mainstreamly. So like in a general basis, the way that we look at it is like, you go, you stretch, you do Pilates, the first image that comes to your mind now maybe is somebody in a meditative pose, or a white woman with in gym clothes and sweatpants on the way to the gym with her mat. That is what the image that will come into mind, and rather than the principles of yoga and what it does for the body and why those practices may be helpful, you completely remove that spiritual element and everything is seen as a gimmick. Even that word, most people probably don't even know what it means. I don't either, but this is what I'm trying to say. Like, it's been the cultural practice is completely stripped out, and Europeans like try to claim for themselves that that's the only method of control that I see happening. And reading this text just allowed me to solidify this understanding. And yeah.
Very great analysis, Miss Mary. This is also very important piece of the text from 561, which states, the European Atamaroho is seeking the self it lacks, but possibility of spirituality as a recognized and valued dimension of experience has been denied to Europeans by the presuppositions and definitions of their Atamawazo, by their worldview, and perhaps, as in this case of Yurugu, by the circumstances of their birth. They therefore interpret their needs to lie elsewhere, an error that sets in motion the process of a European development. Because assessment of their needs is blurred by what Theodore Roszak has called single vision, because they search in the wrong dimensions of human experience, and because they are, by definition, deficient, Yurugu, their search is unending. The more unsatisfying the pursuit, the greater is the assurance of the continued existence of an Atamaroho and disequilibrium and unfulfilled spirit. The unchanging character of the European Atamaroho and the undirectional driving force of the culture, and therefore guaranteed its success and failure, are inseparable and casually linked. This passage reminds me of a number of things. One, of like the suffering, pilgrim who's like very religious and like has to and goes through many suffering on their journey to and on the pursuit of following God. That reminds me of that archetype, this passage. And also reminds me of something I heard from the cows, where this white woman said that she was racist at conception. And I was like, that's really interesting, given that the asili is something that takes shape in pre-birth. It could be that no, it's not could be, seems to be that this sort of behavior, they're this racist, dominate or be dominated mentality is something that they're born with. And even if their so-called suffering caused them like great displeasure, because I'm sure the Crusades wasn't like a cakewalk, but as long as they're able to use their suffering to continue mistreating and dominating others, they definitely will do that. Which is why it's really important to detach from all of their doctrines that they call religion, like Christianity and Catholicism, because all of that has been used to maintain their very, very powerful, grotesque system.
Very well said. And I wanted to talk about what effect this has on the South and the Europeans, and also the non-white people who are subjugated to the European asili. And I'm gonna be going back a bit to 559, and it says, what effect does this have on the self and other European selves to which the world is forced to relate? It is a self or an ego for which no reservoirs of spiritual sustenance are provided. Yet it is faced daily with the granite surface of a materialized world. This ego loses spirituality and frequently becomes deformed, or it maintains its spirituality and goes insane as the culture defines insanity. By controlling the emotions and dulling the senses, the ego, is able to project itself and is in a better position to seek the domination of others. This attitude is supported by rationalistic epistemology, which, as we have seen, requires that the self be split and that its emotional ground be denied. I'm stopped there. But this reminds me of what Neely Fuller Jr. says about turning people into monsters and monstrosities. Everyone is affected by the energy force of the European asili, the energy force of racism, white supremacy, and it reminded me of yesterday when there was a high-speed chase and somewhere in California, and like near Rialto, and it's this white supremacist complex, the system that drives non-white people to put themselves in positions where they're like driving, 100 miles per hour on the highway, being tailed by 5 squad cars. It's every thing I see on the news when it comes to America is like what it says here, insanity. It's people losing their minds because they can no longer participate in the system of racism, white supremacy. And I was doing research on non-white people who have returned to their workplaces after they were let go, and committed acts where people were left not alive anymore. And it comes back to this: dulling the senses, controlling the emotions, people constantly being dominated, and the people who are dominating them are not willing to give them any type of respect or power. And above this part I just read, it says humility, respect are like they're gone. They're not a part of the equation anymore. But yeah, it makes sense. This whole despiritualization and what it does to people, it shows me at least how white supremacy is able to frolic so freely and be sustained so easily, like a flying machine. And I'm pretty sure she calls the European asili like a machine, in the text.
And then just to add to that, what you're talking about also reminds me of the like when you go see a psychologist. I'm not sure if anyone has seen a psychologist before and who their psychologist was, but one of the things I think about when I went, first of all, was this white woman. And when I walked in, I already knew it wasn't like there was going to be no connection, but it was a very interesting interaction. And also like they asked lots of questions, like just to first get to know you. And then they ask you like, how do you feel about things and all these, how you like everything. But in my head, what I'm thinking is like, as I'm explaining what I see as like problems, but now realizing like problems due to racism and white supremacy, this lady is not going to give me anything of much value other than to breathe, take breaths, like deep breaths. But I think one of the things that I think about is like, that could be a form of like refinement, is because they almost like, okay, coming back next week or continue to come see me, is like almost trying to rewire your brain, but also keep it in a sense of like, in their systematic ways of thought. So they're just like, oh, okay, you're already feeling like there's something off about the world or the society that you live in. But when you come see me, I'm going to help you refine that thought to make you believe that is something of your, like, that you or your family has created, and we can get you out of this. We can either get you out of this by some therapy, like let's go and like walk through each of these instances, or let's go ahead and just medicate you. Maybe you need some medication to help you so I can keep you, because it seems that you're breaking through too fast. So let me go ahead and medicate you to keep you in the same, what is it? Almost like with the medication, it keeps you in this, like, what is it called? I don't want to, like, fog, like kind of like foggy, like, yeah, like a trance. Thank you. Like this trance, like you can't even get like your regular thoughts to come through because you're trying to suppress them. So I think it's very interesting. I keep analyzing this, and every time I think about like therapy or like psychologists, I only could think of someone who knows about racism, white supremacy in order to even help you get through it. But I also think it's a community thing. But going to see the white person, I'm not sure how helpful that is, because also too, what brings me to my next point is like the chart that they use is off of what their understanding is of the world, of their life. And they don't have any aspect of like spiritual or loving or anything that has to do with like humans. So it's almost like they're not even in tune with the chart that they're providing or checking off, where they're asking you questions. They're just doing it merely because it's their job and because they're pretending to care. So it's just like, it's very interesting, like these dynamics. And I wonder like how it could be like any different, but I obviously under the system of racial white supremacy, I can't see it being any different, whether it's someone who's Black or someone who's Hispanic or someone non-white, also in those positions, who were taught by the European to treat those who are non-white. So it's very interesting. Thank you, sir.
Wow, no, yeah, that's really, really interesting thought. Yeah, and yeah, I suspect that what you said has high validity, because how can a racist suspect treat or help any non-white person without producing justice or giving constructive help to a non-white person, which is not the case in most of those scenarios, I am certain.
I wanted to comment on what Nana Ya said and then what Sert said. But first, Nana Ya, I think what she was saying, it really reminds me of like why, as like a non-white person, I really don't like some of the jobs that I've had or that I'm doing, because I feel most of the time like I'm not doing anything except helping the system. You know, I think about why isn't there a Black psychologist, right? And it's just like, because she's not actually doing anything to prevent these people from coming in there. It's more of like just applying a Band-Aid, right? Just being a part of the system, right? Those people need to be there in order to keep the system going, because they know that these people are going to be traumatized. They're going to be having these psychological issues, and there is the population for it, but they're not necessarily helping to prevent that from happening. All that they're doing is to ensure that these people are there, and that they still need, they so-called need these psychiatrists or these psychologists. To comment on kind of on what Sert was saying, I think a lot of that comes from this rational mode that is dominant and with the Yurugu and their culture and their society. Dr. Ani does mention, rationalism as being one of the dominant modes, and I think that plays a very large part in the despiritualization of the world that we live in. On page 557, where she says, what is not near cannot be felt. The more intensified this process becomes, the more European intellect focuses on the things and objects it has created through abstractification and objectification, and less is understood of what is truly human as it escapes perception. I interpret that kind of as, I wrote here, like, it kind of reminds me of Sunday school, like when I used to go to Sunday school as a kid, like just being there and not like, why am I here? Like, why am I doing this? I'm not feeling anything, just being very like rational about it, right? I mean, of course, this isn't the means or the religion or the correct way that I should be trying to feel spiritual or practice spirituality, but the fact that like I couldn't conceptualize or perceive that, you know, that it's about a spiritual practice that it's something that I can't feel, something that I can't see, so therefore it has no purpose. And that's really a lot of what has to do with this despiritualization that we are experiencing with the world right now. Everything is coming down to, you know, numbers, data sets, cash, you know, and when you're taking that into account, you can like that's the driving force between all the things that are going on in the planet. The planet is literally dying. The oceans are drying out. We're experiencing record heat waves. I'm pretty sure there's going to be another super drought in California. I'm reading all these disastrous things, and then I noticed we have these documentaries of, you know, Yurugu making documentaries about the problems that they've created and then how they plan to solve them. But it goes back to not critiquing or analyzing your behaviors, because the problem isn't like the planet or a misunderstanding, because white supremacy, they definitely know what they're doing. They're very much aware. Like she says that Yurugu, on page 558, she says, even as Europeans seek to effectively despiritualize their surroundings, they're aware of the spiritual aspect of existence. But given the premise of their rationalistic epistemology, it must remain forever unknowable, unattainable. So they are very much aware of the spirituality that goes on in the world. Therefore, I believe that they are very aware of the practices that they are participating in, that are despiritualizing the world and destroying the world that we live on. But then yet again, they're not critiquing themselves. I may have gotten slightly off topic, but that's a...
No, I totally agree. And a prime example is the sensation Greta. I don't remember her last name, but she's I guess a climate activist or something like that. But she fights for planet Earth, and she never once mentioned. I think her name is Greta Thunberg. She never once mentioned why planet Earth is being so negatively affected by human activities. She pretty much just talks about what she plans to do to help fight climate change. And I wanted to read a bit on 559 that provides a bit more information onto how Europeans, one, program us non-white people to behave, and how they innately behave because of their asili demands it. So it reads, interculturally, there's no basis for morality. Instead, there is a merely competitive ethic. The well-being and success of each desperate self or ego is threatened by that of others. Instead of being dependent on their well-being, European social structures depend for their proper, efficient functioning on mutual aggression, distrust, and competitiveness, i.e., fundamentally hostile relationships. If love were to enter into these microsystems, they would break down, but they are insured against this occurrence since they breed for code, calculation, and reward competitiveness and aggression. In a recent psychological test, the male personality was described as aggressive, assertive, ambitious, competitive, dominant, forceful, independent, self-reliant, while the female personality was affectionate, compassionate, gentle, loving toward children, loyal, sensitive, sympathetic, understanding, warm. Obviously, the male characteristics correspond to the European self-image. And obviously, not obviously, but the other ones are the aspects of a female that they don't want to claim or practice. I read this bit because I see these types of things manifesting in front of me every day. I watched not the news, but a lot of crime, what happens, like crimes of the week, crimes of the month, and every single week there's a case of Europeans who are quote unquote in love, quote unquote in a marriage, and they are killing each other for the money from their insurance. So there, to me, there is no real love in Western society. Not that I've seen on practiced by Europeans. It's always these really, really toxic relationships where someone is trying to get over the other person. There's always a level of aggression. And any relationship a non-white person has with a white person, I suspect there to be a lot of conscious or subconscious aggression that's just immediately there. For example, I was walking home. No, I was not walking home. I was walking to a bus stop from a photo shoot that I just did today, and there was a non-white child and a white child walking, and the white child is like fake punching the non-white child, and the non-white child who's would be classified as black, and he's just flinching and like really, not really enjoying it. He's being punked by this white boy, and they can't be more than 7 years old when you're walking down the street. And this is happening in London. I'm like, see, this is the program is happening right before my eyes. I'm seeing this, this the need to dominate even in children, and it takes racist man, racist woman, and racist child to sustain the system of racism, white supremacy.
Very very well said. Oh, wow, really, really tragic, but not surprised at all. They are trained very, very, very early, and both in all areas of the world, I would say. Racist child.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
So with this information that, like, as I'm now looking, because we're coming to the end of this book and I really want to be able to apply this. And I know the code is the most obligated way to apply counter racism. But with this knowledge and like what Sert experienced earlier today, just as normal, some people do, like some people speak out against injustice. I remember seeing like so many fights and people acting like they couldn't see it on their phones, and unless they're paying attention with their phones because it's something worth recording. Before that was popular, people would not pay attention at all, just like mind their own business sort of thing. And I feel like with this information that we have, like, Sir, would you say as well, sorry, I'd ask you first and then everybody else, would you say that at that moment in time you thought of something that you might wanted to say to the non-white little boy to like encourage him for the future and next time, based on the understanding of the asili?
Sorry, did you hear the question?
Sorry, can you reiterate the question, please? I mind blanked.
I was saying that in the circumstances that you experienced today with the knowledge of the European asili and how the Utamawazo works, would you say that you would, what kind of advice would you have given that little boy today for them seeking dominance at a child age, even though it seems innocent, it's rooted in a personality that develops into an attitude that develops into some form of a mental disorder where you're consistently obsessed with a type of person, and like your trigger words in your brain are very easily like narrowed towards being like, let's just say a hillbilly, or like no, the most intelligent person can have these biracial these cues. I know I experience it because I go to work, and I mean, as soon as I come into the environment and I know that there's a European there, I know that there's going to be some form of micromanaging experience at some point, and I always try to. I can't say I'll be on code because I haven't started reading yet, but my own understanding and intuition will guide me to have minimal communication and do my work from like a space location where I can see what I'm doing versus someone being able to peer over, which happens quite consistently. But the point is that it develops into such a strong conditioning and behavior that is so noticeable, and it's like Tourette's. So what would you say to that child or to children to how they would manage that behavior at that age?
See, I was thinking, because at the shoot I had people ask questions that I try to answer really concisely and with what I really think is to be the truth. And whenever I mention white supremacy, people just really shut down and really get it's like you're attempting to push a button on their brain computer, and if they're willing to, like, help replace the system and replace white supremacy, they may talk about it or listen. But most people are so programmed that they just really turn off and really see me as a insane person who's obsessed with race when I'm not obsessed with anything. I'm just I know a problem exists and I'm interested in solving it. So in the context of the children, I would just tell them, don't let anyone mistreat you. And even though you guys may be playing, that's not how you should be playing, where someone is like making a joke about mistreating you. And so that's me walking to the bus stop. When I got to the bus stop, there was a very similar scenario, but this time it was an older, non-white teenager being called fat over and over again by probably a 9-year-old white child, and just calling him fat, like, you're fat. And then he was just saying, no, I'm not, you're fat. But the kid was, skinny. But the non-white person was a little bigger than most kids. But he was being called fat. And it was just me and these two kids at the bus stop, And I was like, wow. The program is, not the program, racism, white supremacy is working very well here. So for those kids, I would, if I wanted to help, or if I felt inclined to help, I would just say, hey, this is not correct behavior. But I had no interest in engaging. I was very tired and just wanted to get on the bus to get back to my dwelling.
Understood. Thanks for sharing. And thanks for the question, Miss Mary. Anyone else like to share? Conclusion, Yurugu, the incomplete being.
Yeah, I just have one more other thought too, as everyone was sharing, and also reading the conclusion, and now actually thinking about different, just really analyzing European behavior. And I think one of the things I've been doing is watching different documentaries on Netflix. Obviously, like, I know, like, that's coming through like a European lens as well. So everything is like manipulated and to fit what they want it to fit. But I think one of the things I see in these documentaries that I've been watching, especially like the drug ones like crack and heroin, the epidemic here in California, is just thinking about like the intentionality of it all, and the reason for it. And as I mentioned before, is like thinking about like the different aspects of life, like the psychologist and like the crack epidemic and like different parts where I think of drugs and things that have to be like puts you almost in a different mind set and almost like eases you or whatever feeling that you get from the drug, that whatever drug it is, it's like different from your body state. And I think it's very intentional to be that way. Especially since the crack epidemic is known to be drug infiltration of the white supremacists and literally put it on non-white people in order to keep them from actually like waking up, but keeping them like a sleeping people. I always think of that phrase when I think of people who aren't going to see the problem. But I think all of these tactics and these ways are keeping people far from even thinking about racism, white supremacy. And I think it's also putting people in a European mindset of almost like as a European though. Like even though they might see their skin like, oh, I'm part of the African descendant, but they see themselves as a European and think of themselves as a European, even though they visually see that they might have darker skin or whatever it is, melanin. But all to say, like, it was very strategic, you know, and I think like really, I don't know if they fully understand what they were doing to the point where they knew the outcome of it, but they knew they're gonna have something else next, regardless of the outcome. So even if like all of these tactics weren't, let's say, not gonna work, they didn't work, but it just happened that they did work because they kept including different aspects of the system in order to keep people in this mindset of racial white supremacy. So also like thinking of when I talk to people about like Yurugu or even talking about just European behavior, whether it's with a European or with a non-white person, it's just like being able to point out these different instances, especially throughout history and especially modern day, is very important because I think like even without having like modern day experiences and like thinking about this, I don't know if I really fully understand it, because even going up to a white person and they're coming to me and like talking about their problems and I bring up racism and white supremacy, they're kind of just like, they almost like disengaged, as everyone has said. They don't even not participate, but want to talk about it or understand. They're like, oh no, it's because of this or it's because of that. So very interesting.
Yeah, I want to read something from 565, but also before I do that, I wanted to say that the whole people shutting down when you mention racism, white supremacy, that's just a reminder to people who are trying to solve the problem and counter racist scientists that they're doing their job effectively, because you have victims who are unwilling to even speak on the notion of some type of justice being wrangled up somehow. But I've been thinking a lot about how white people and Europeans, they need non-white people on the planet, basically as some form of human cattle. Black males are, jam-packed in a lot of prisons, and that's by design. And so it reads on page 565, while the Utamoroho demands the destruction of others, it is simultaneously dependent on the existence of the cultural other for its definition and functioning. It is, after all, the European Utamoroho that is least self-sufficient. Without other, there is no possibility of power. It is this sense that the European culture can never be self-reliant or even constructively isolationist. Europe itself is barren, depending on the resources, spiritual as well as material, of others for existence. In accordance with the historical record of European intercultural behavior, capitalism demonstrates this well. It is acquisitive and exploitative in principle. It must ever seek new markets to control, new resources to exploit. It can never be a system at rest. Communalism and the African worldview, on the other hand, are predicated on balance and interrelationships, on the eternality of the moment. And I'm just going to read this last part as well. Ontologically, the European experience demands that the universe become an aggregation of distinctively desperate beings, eternally independent of one another. The cosmos is reduced simply to the superhuman rational European cultural ego, and all other forms of life are despiritualized. And this brings me to the point I want to mention, and how I've been attempting to consistently connect mass shootings with racism, white supremacy, because I do think that it's a direct result of racism, white supremacy, where you have white people, Europeans, who have been conditioned to the existence of the other. These people who I can kill, I can abuse and exploit and mistreat, but also you're dependent on everyone around you, but you're supposed to be an individual. So you're living in this hyper contradictionary world where everything you say is untrue, and all your behavior patterns go against what you're thinking. And it's just the levels of confusion are so drastic, to the point where I think I read a stat where it said that there have been 100 plus shootings in America, mass shootings in America since the beginning of 2021. And that brings me to the aggregation of like desperate beings. All these desperate white people trying to get power, trying to get some type of control. And if they can't get it, they'll just eliminate people, and then they'll go out in a bang, or they'll spend the rest of their life in a mental ward or a prison. But that insatiable need to kill and control is very real. And if they're not able to practice that, I think we're gonna see a lot more mass shootings, a lot more non-white people and white people becoming victims of white supremacy, because this is not gonna stop until it's solved. And the European asili is expansionistic, and that includes expanding death and destruction. So just wanted to say that and get that out.
I will say what you and Nanaya have said reminds me of how the Yurugu is undirectional. It doesn't really have an idea of where it's going. It just knows that it wants to continue to expand and continue to mistreat and dominate people who it will not classify as white / European. So I believe you are very correct. And the reality that many people will continue to die, be killed due to the many manifestations of white supremacy that are born just to destroy for fun, to be glorified. Because a lot of these people could be just killing just for fun of it. Hey, the system is not treating me as I like it to be treated me. I'm gonna go out, like what you said, with a bang, go have some fun. Have an army of internet people worshiping me down the line because of what I did, or be taken care of while being a celebrity, Dylan Roof. So really important to understand what exactly the hell we're dealing with when we are speaking of the Yurugu and the system of white supremacy. Very effective, very dangerous. And I think this part here from 556 does a great job at explaining the relationship between non-white people and white people, and like exactly the sort of dynamic that we have allowed to exist. And exactly really good ways of describing the system, the culture the system produces.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so 556 states the co-chair is Faustian. For success, it has sacrificed soul. What is left is profane. Aesthetically and in terms of self-image, it identifies as white. Europe is a cultural home with people who identify as one race, but band together as one race for survival and destruction of other. They will destroy each other if there are not others to destroy. They fear and hate blackness, which they associate with spiritual power, a power which they can neither possess, create, nor control. So even though we are subjugated by the system of white supremacy, they still that's still not enough. They still believe that they are not controlling our spirits, even though they have completely retarded our will. I would say they are controlling us totally, but according to their logic, it's not enough. It can never be enough according to their genetic makeup, it seems. And yeah, someone mentioned earlier, but I'll just reinstate it that they are hell bent on expanding. They're trying to take this mistreatment to Mars by as early as 2024. They want to put people on Mars. So that's something that I would view to be really, really incorrect. The system being allowed to spread to other planets, which is definitely what they want. So it's really important to get the effective numbers before that happens.
I completely agree, most definitely. Sorry, was you finished?
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree, because I believe if they could find out that Mars is habitable, they experiment on it for a couple of months, they definitely will have no fear in nuclear bombing anywhere that or atomic bombing anywhere that they have fear and are threatened by, if they have somewhere secure that their elites can securely live on. So I guess we have till 2024, and then that couple months experimenting, if that hasn't already been done. But I actually wanted to read back at Power Logos, because it helps expand on what you're talking about as well, and also catches back on what Regine, Nanaya, and Tracian had said. I think it's important to understand as well, like the way that the European has, especially based on what you're talking about there, and the way that they've expanded themselves. And they won't say it's in the name of white supremacy, but they have now reorganized in a way that because they don't do things through spirituality, they do it through like lust or desire or just that incessant need. And those things being like the primary things in society, we end up, we make those our values, and then unconsciously add to this machine. Well, now consciously, in a sense, continue to add to the machine if we've now grown accustomed to these luxuries and products. But let me just read what I wanted to read, because it will help bring full circle what I wanted to explain. The chronic disharmony and imbalance of the Ultima Rojo perverts spirit into lust. As emotional security is sought via material control, the need for fulfillment becomes the ceaseless will to power, i.e. the self-realization of the asili, the nature of the Ultima Rojo. It is itself the guaranteed source of continued energy to be put in at the service of the European quest for greater and greater power. And this power drive becomes the premise of the culture, that fundamental aspect of which all others depend. just to stop there, think about in the sense that the Europeans, okay, Dr. Marimba Ani has mentioned lust there. Think about in the sense where sex sells because of white supremacy, because that is their desire, and that's why they've created some kind of objectification of women. Everything they hate, they will put it and can put it in this context. And even the sadistic methods of treatment of Black people, slavery, is a sexual relationship, is porn, is BDSM, is expressed in every single level of sophistication that they can, and call it sophistication. And that's the problem. Brutal ways of existing is preserved in their culture as sophistication. And that's what we need to like really address and separate ourselves from, in a sense, to really make sense of, to solidify our own blueprint on this planet. Because if understanding the context of pretty privilege, that's also the same context of white supremacy, because they've created this box and told you what is aesthetically pleasing by bombarding images into our mind from childhood. So naturally, we're in the losing game of trying to play the beauty game, or all these things that are driven in social media, also by the consumerism that social media allows us to do for their own capitalization. But I'm going to stop there. I'm sure my point has been made, and I hope I wanted to get people's, not necessarily get people's thoughts on that, but I think that part that I just read really helps to like encapsulate everything that I've heard from Nanaya and Tracian, Cert and O5.
Yeah, very much agreed. Does anyone like to comment?
I wanted to, this is Quaker again. I wanted to read this part from 566, which kind of goes in line with what we've been discussing. And it's about, it says here on 566, there's no aspect of intercultural behavior in which the Tamarojo will allow the European to be taught by majority peoples or to participate as a non-competing equal. This is why the idea of Africans seeking equality from Europeans is an apolitical approach to reality. Equally absurd is the attempt to enlighten or change them. The success of the culture is due to the fact that nothing within it ideologically conflicts with the quest of power, for power. So, you know, that was a very powerful statement. It just kind of goes back to why the concept of asili is necessary, because it's, like she said, it's absurd to try and change these people, given evidence and given the history, the facts, that you cannot change these people. The best way to arm yourself against them is to understand their asili, understand their goals. I had a reason for that earlier. Can't remember it right now. I also wanted to mention this idea of progress a little bit above it, and kind of talking about how progress is a power ideology. So I kind of understand like the Yurugu creating the circumstances and creating the scenario for where they can practice the utmost power and control over it. So the instances of the number of mass shootings going on, it'll be a point in time where it will be considered progress when the number of mass shootings has decreased from the anticipated, the average number. The mass shootings, could get so bad we'll probably get to such a point where a decrease in the numbers will be seen as progress. If we have 100 less shootings than we did the year before, that's going to be seen as progress. And they'll interpret that as having power over the situation, for a situation that they completely created on their own. So that's
I would say even like the whole I feel like even with the obsession with like progress, it wouldn't even be like about the like it would be like, look how this new technology has helped us surveil so that we can find more mass shootings before they happen. It's never going to the root of the problem. It's just like, what can this new technology do to somehow fix, so-called like fix a problem temporarily? I feel like the progress is always based in that. And then I liked what you read earlier, especially because I think there's like a big thing about white people listening and like listening to especially like Black people or majority people. And I like that line because it really shows you that all of this like white ally, oh, I'm gonna listen to you, it's all like fake. And it's they're not actually listening to you because they don't see you as equal. It's just performative for them. So it's always like important, like and when you're in a space with white people, to not like have them sitting there and listening and observing, because they're just able to take more notes and watch non-white people. And it's like much more important to like put them on the spot and kind of question them.
Yeah, I want to, very well said, Ash. I wanted to respond to a little bit of what Mary Miss Nebula has said, and Kwaku. I do not really know how to deal with a the Yurugu, a being that exists in its heart area and his driving part. Emotionally, he wants it. They want power. They have an insatiable lust for power, and some organisms exist just to give life and be a part of nature. This thing is totally out of the box. So the whole power as local sections refined my knowledge that Europeans are just for the most part dangerous, unpredictable. But when you have this information, the unpredictable part becomes not true anymore, because you know that they're gonna attempt to mistreat you, control you, manipulate you, and drive you to be anti-life, anti-nature, and basically despiritualized, like they're born. So that's what I wanted to just say. I did have something to respond to Ash, but I cannot remember.
Very well said, sir. Yeah, at once I thought this was all random about the chaos in the world, but no, this is just the nature of the people who operate the planet. And
I remember.
Oh, go ahead.
So Ash said something about the mass shootings and the fake progress and the performative stuff. So I suspect that America benefits greatly from these mass shootings, and I think it's very, very it's very tragic that one of the measures that they've put in place is like lockdown, where if there's a mass shooter, students are encouraged to hide underneath the desk, which to me is not really constructive, because the school shooter could just come into the room and just shoot the children underneath the desk, which has happened before during mass shootings. So even the measures they put in place are, to me, it's like they're not taking it seriously, or they want to have maximum casualties when these things happen, because death for Europeans is a profit. There's insurance involved. There's all these things that as a non-white person, a non-white Black person, that I can't quite understand, because I have not informed, nor have I allocated time and energy to investigate further those areas. But I suspect that because Europeans are Europeans, that they get a thrill of all death, even when it's their own children in schoolrooms. And I am beginning to suspect that when you see these people crying, they are acting, they are performing for each other, and subconsciously or even consciously, all of them are happily being Yurugu and happily with the system of racism, white supremacy being on planet Earth. I'm starting to suspect that that may be the case because I have yet to interact with a white person about the race problem and feel that they actually would be a fellow solutionist, fellow counter-racist scientist to remove their power source from the planet. And I just don't see it happening. I don't know if that's logical to believe that it's possible.
I believe all mass shootings are planned and that the government is well aware of them. And it's meant to keep us in the state that we are in right now, where we fear going out and we fear being around people. Just like in the 70s, how there was a huge spike in serial killers. But that's just my opinion.
Very well said, sir. I know. I think a lot of victims can be confused by believing that white people are ignorant about racism. I myself used to believe such a silly thing as well. But when we understand that, well, I understand that like some white people even know they're the Yurugu, like the most powerful, most intelligent white people. Not only are they aware that they are like the operators of the system of white supremacy, but they are aware of like what that means and why they're doing that. So I think white people may even revel in the idea that they are the Yurugu on this planet to destroy, and destroying and killing for them are just a business, just something that they do really well and take great pride in doing it. You know, call it Yurugu pride or something, or just white supremacy, a proud white supremacist. But there are some who may be on a little less informed side who don't understand that they are the Yurugu, but they definitely understand that they are helping the system to be and function because they're not doing a single thing to replace it with a system of justice. And reminds me of what Kwaku read, and how like it makes no sense, almost makes no sense to even think that we can function on the same planet as them without being mistreated, which is why I think the code is really important, because we need to get them to make a decision. Okay, you gotta stop mistreating us and produce justice, or kill all of us, because this like slow process, this kill a couple of us, let a few of us live, let a few of us get more comfort. This ain't gonna fly anymore. Either produce justice or kill all of us, because I could care less to be on a planet with a Yurugu. You know, I'd rather be dead or have us be living in a system of justice. But it's just really profound conclusion, to say the least.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I just wanted to read some of the notes that I got from reading page 365. Of course, it's mainly going to be studied in what's actually said, so you hear some of that. But the Europeans forcement, the way that they forced themselves into the position of authority through anthropology, and have created this context of subhuman if you do not like appeal to their version of sophistication, or how they have like put Christianity to how it is, or how the white supremacy within Arabian culture has shaped it towards their Arabian culture, and then the African is left to choose which one are they going to be civilized or sophisticated by. And we look at society in the world, and it's that despiritualization has made us void of even understanding what the days of the week are, what it means to observe or be on the planet and experience time and space, like how in Islam right now they're observing Ramadan, that mentality of oh, that's for Muslims to do. What if anybody would look up on Ramadan, they would see that they're waiting for a sighting of a moon. And if they're waiting for the sighting of a moon, or like the position of a planet, in order to observe this spiritual fast and observe that what the thoughts that come into their mind, or become like one with the system of the sun rising and the sun falling, and having to like have this in your mind on a daily basis. Why is that such a Muslim thing? Why is it not a global, universal observation? And I find now more and more each year, more people who are non-Muslim would observe at this time, because it's like a community of people who are doing it as well. But if you are looking through the lens of the European understanding, or the way that we've been educated or socialized around each other, it's like we separate how we explore our relationship with God, if you know what I mean. And I definitely believe African spirituality encompasses all of this, which is why you'd look back culturally and you'd know that Tai Chi is connected in a way, or you'd understand that some of the traditions of Jewish culture are rooted in African spirituality. There wasn't one way of expression. And I feel like it would be good for us to get back to that, and it'll help create that understanding of unity. Okay, so to continue reading, subhuman, to controlled, culturally distorted. Okay, so they'll go to like an African country through their expansionism, control it culturally by distorting what the actual root of the culture is, and then feeding it back to you, like how they've given back Christianity. Through expansionism, categorizing things that don't need to be categorized and labeling them. So boxing off its connection or communication, or why anybody will feel connected to it if it's within a category that apparently maybe won't be associated with their class. And then they'll send back this information and intel and destabilize whatever cultural value that may have had. And that is how they reign within their colonial control, and how they keep it. And it just shows that they're completely dependent on others to be powerful. They couldn't do that within themselves and maintain it. They have to be able to enter your borders. So it's a thing of building more boundaries within our culture, and not how we express it, but how we give it to them, how we give it to society. Like the European asili mentality really encourages that. It makes sense as to why their desires and traits are what it kind of takes. It kind of kills you to like ascend in European culture, society, or build yourself in a career, like to become a CEO. One of the ways in which like it's culturally gimmickly tested is by your ability to be able to fire or make a decision, or disappoint someone else to go back up into a higher position. It's all this sense of grooming that they do to teach you that if you don't one up on somebody else, you are not worthy of the title of being a European whatever context. You're not powerful if you can't create a pain or fear in somebody. And so these traits are now rewarded, like forcing the asili to be desirable, because we see money being associated with it, security being associated with it. And what this made me think about in terms of what people have been chasing because of this European asili, and adopting it in ourselves, as try and like just ascending money and thinking that's a form of comfort, is that we've lost the rites of passage to observations like this, and seeing it as global cosmic citizens who can participate in something, rather than, oh no, it's Muslims fasting now, sort of thing. Like we've lost that ability to just have, like, for that to just be a universal truth. And it made me think about what is celebrated and how everybody participates on it on a secular level, like Christian, like Christmas. So everybody is globally given off this energy at Christmas. And I'm not saying it's not always necessarily a bad thing, but how about these other dates that are observed that have been boxed off to only isolated as only certain people can celebrate it? How do we know that universally participating in it is something that metaphysically encourages or helps the earth through the observations that you may get through, I don't know, fasting at a certain period of time? I'll leave that there for now. sorry, let me just finish what I've actually written, because it might be helpful to somebody or someone's thought track. So spiritual rites of passage we're missing out on universally. The cosmos are only mainly being energetically spiked according to the traditions of the European, that the European asili upholds. We're currently in Ramadan with the disillusion of religion and spiritual practices being non-linear. A lot of people practicing in Ramadan, okay, so that's me just reading my notes, sorry. For spiritual reasons, being connected to the cosmos allows us to tap into these observations and see them as just that, not separate on who should or who gets to observe by and then of course I already made the statement about Christmas being a time of us highly globally energetically raising our vibrations and observing that time period, and yeah, just be more conscious about that and thinking globally what time and our space and earth do we want to raise our energy vibrations, what do we want to help towards in terms of the healing vibrations that are needed to keep people sustained and keep the information that we are receiving for our bodies going. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. I think what you said is a great example of how ritualistic the system of how ritualistic and occultist the system of race and white supremacy is. I'm just reminded of the book I just started reading called Program to Kill, and just the forms of how abuse of children, of people is not only made a systematic procedure that certain white people just seem to be able to embellish in, and certain white agencies like the CIA seem to perpetuate and encourage. It has a ritualistic tone to it. And for example, in the book Program to Kill, I learned that a lot of missing children and a lot of atrocious things seem to happen on around white holidays. And this is not this is something that is very well known in the white psyche, I believe. But very, very and just comparing this conclusion and what the Yurugu is with what I've been like learning to be happening amongst the people of planet Earth involving white people and what they're doing to non-white people and other white people globally. It's just that this is really a really sick system we happen to be born in. Like, if you cannot serve the system or like be used to as some kind of conduit for power or pleasure, then you are literally worthless to this system. And children seem to only be worth being abused by white people or mistreated by white people, because the system doesn't protect anyone, and it definitely uses children for grotesque, nefarious reasons that I hope more of non-white people start to investigate in, and just to that's a quick insight to how evil the system is, being able to see how it allows people who mistreat children to just not go to jail, not spend very much time in prison for their crimes, or to not even be convicted at all. And why is there so much connection to political agencies involving child abuse? It's just really the Yurugu really explains how all of these behaviors can take place. It's because we're dealing with a entity of disorganization, an entity of disorder, and there's nothing more nothing more chaotic and disorderly than a system that eats all people, especially children, for breakfast, literally. Does anyone have any more things to share, or should we move into closing comments?
I just wanted to read the last paragraph. I could do that for my closing comment. That's fine.
I'm scanning to my notes. I want to see if I got through everything, but feel free.
Okay. So the last paragraph, I found this to be a very great piece of work. I kind of summarize this as kind of solutions moving forward, kind of what we need to do as a people, as a culture, to counter the Yurugu. Dr. He says on 570, but in this endeavor, there is a danger of becoming possessed ourselves by the very definitions that we have denied. Now that we have broken the power of their ideology, we must leave them and direct our energies toward the recreation of cultural alternatives informed by ancestral visions of a future that celebrates our Africanness and encourages the best of the human spirit. Each of the cultures historically victimized by Europe must reclaim its own image. As for those of us who are African, our salvation, redemption, lies in our ancientness and connectedness, not in a romanticized glorification of the past, but in a return to the center in which all contradictions are resolved, and from which the spiral of development can continue with clarity. From the center, icons can be retrieved in our image that will allow us to tap the energy of the collective conscious will of our people. I can leave the poem to somebody else, but just a comment on that last paragraph. It reminds me of when I went to the book fair, the UNIAC, or can't remember the abbreviation, and Dr. Jeff Menzies spoke and talked about how something that we can do is really go back to our practicing, I guess, those African rituals, some of the things that gave us power, and really remembering those things that gave us power and starting to reclaim them. When she talks about becoming possessed ourselves by the very definitions that we have denied, I think that's kind of a reminder that, we have been, unfortunately, trained and conditioned by the Yurugu under the system of racism, white supremacy. So as we go about the business of countering it and creating cultural alternatives, it's important to remember that we can become possessed. We can become possessed by the asili, by the training, by the conditioning, that we can fall back into it if we aren't careful. I think when she also mentions, as for those of us who are African, our salvation, redemption lies in our ancientness and connectedness, not in a romanticized glorification of the past. I think that is also a very good point, because one thing often that happens way too much is we pay attention to the past, but we just talk about the glory, kind of like the glory days, like we were great people, but that's in the past. We can't there's absolutely no way that we can recreate that given the system that we are under and the conditions that we live in. So our best bet is to take what is necessary take what works from those ancient practices, from our ancientness, and from the past, and reapply it to today. As we go on, as we start to direct our energies and recreate the cultural alternatives, understanding that we are being dominated by European cultural behavior and thought, understanding that the cultural asili of the Yurugu it would be of great benefit to the people, to majority cultures, as we try not to fall for it again, not to be fooled twice. That's all I want to say.
The poem's also really great, but it's I'd like someone else to read it if they want. If not, I can read it.
For my closing comments, I wanted to say, like, there's a reason why you're non-white, especially if you're non-white and Black. There's a reason why you're mistreated every single day. There's a reason why you have family members and who are dead, who should have lived longer lives. There's a reason why you have family members who are in greater confinement, also known as prison or jail. And there's a reason why you can't seem to, get your head on straight or get to where you want to go. And the reason is Yurugu. It's because of racism, white supremacy, and the people who are sustaining it. And I wanted to read the opening quote that 0526 I read as my closing comments, because I think it really just concisely gives an image of the Europeans that should be in every single one's mind. And it reads, and it's the quote by Awe Kwe Arma. It was not always so. The desert was made the desert, turned barren by a people whose spirit is itself the seed of death. Each single one of them is a carrier of destruction. The spirit of their coming together, the purpose of their existence is the spread of death over all the earth. An insatiable urge drives them. I suspect this to be true. That's not the quote, that's me. I suspect this to be a very, very accurate interpretation of what's going on planet Earth.
Thank you, Mr. Sert and Mr. Kwaku. Closing comments, anyone?
Yes. For the closing comment, I'm gonna read the poem 570 that Zeke wanted. So just to start off, it says, "It is our destiny not to flee the predator's thrust, not to seek hiding places from destroyer's left triumph, but to turn against the predators advancing, turn against the destroyers and bending all our soul against their thrust, turning every stratagem of the destroyers against themselves, destroy them. That is our destiny, to end destruction utterly, to begin the highest, the profoundest work of creation, the work that is inseparable from our way, inseparable from the way." I just want to end it with that quote. I thought it was a great just wrap up from all that I read. I don't know why I feel like I'm getting emotional, but just realizing like we've actually all got through this book together, and just thinking of myself starting from 100 pages behind and actually being self-determined to catch up and finish through. And I think coming to this end here is just, it feels so real, honestly. Like I didn't know or know the feeling I would feel like when we finished this book, but I'm just so happy that we got through it and got so many good gems and just more strategy to understand the world we all live in, and also almost like some energy passed on to us in order to continuing counter racism, white supremacy. And I think it's very important that we continue to return back to this book through our life as we continue to fight racism and white supremacy. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Very, very powerful. Closing comments, folks?
Yes, thank you so much, Nanea. That was absolutely beautiful. I couldn't have said it better myself. I'm just really grateful for this experience. I'm grateful for the perseverance of reading and breaking those mental barriers of laziness when it comes to reading, and taking it on the forefront of allowing it to shape thoughts, the way I want to communicate, the work that I did. I'm really grateful. I think I actually found this book for us. So thank you so much, Ashley, for bringing this to the Counter-Racist and White Supremacy Book Club. It's a book that I'm so happy to have this kind of vocabulary or access to some of the words that I've never actually heard of before. It let me know that I had a lot of not even catching up to do. I had a lot of embracing to do for the kind of words that are very good. And it's just, if you read this, for me, it's like affirmations that you need to give you the confidence to know that you are armed, not just armed, but you know what you're talking about. And white supremacy cannot claim this as a pseudoscience, because it validates and crystallizes a lot of our experiences, but through higher learning. And there's something very validating in that when you go through academia and everything about it is so Europeanized and forcefully so, it almost removes any kind of honor that you would have had for your own natural culture if you didn't know too much about it. So I'm grateful for this contribution. And I wanted us, if possible, if everybody has access, or if somebody could share the poem, also by the same poet, what's his name? Aye Kwe Arma, right, on page 569 at the bottom. I'm gonna read like the first 2 lines, but then if anybody wanted to just read on paragraph to paragraph, that would be really good. Just join in naturally. Does someone want to share it, or does everybody have access to it?
I have access.
Is that a difference between what Nana just read?
Did Nana read Towards a Vision of Human Spirit?
Oh no, she read the poem at the end.
Yeah, there's several.
Okay.
Okay, so it's on page 569 at the bottom. What a scene of carnage the white destroyers have brought here. What a destruction of bodies, what a death of souls. Against this, what a vision of creation yet unknown, higher, much more profound than all erstwhile creation. What a hearing of the conflusion of all the waters of life flowing to overwhelm the ashen desert's blight. Does anyone want to continue? I don't mind going on.
What an utterance of the coming together of all the peoples of our way, the coming together of all people of the way. Their news was also of relationships, of a beauty still to be realized, of paths to be found. Their news was of the way, the forgotten and the future way.
All beauty is the creative purpose of our relationships. All ugliness is in the destructive aims of the destroyer's arrangements. The mind knows that the destroyers will set traps for it, but the destroyer's traps will never hold that mind. The group that knows this and works knowing this, that group itself is a work of beauty, creation's work.
Beautiful. Yeah, that concludes my thoughts for the closing comment. That poem in itself just says it. We being here doing what we're doing, it shows that there's hope in the world. And I'm not going to put that on my head and say that that's that we are, or on our heads and say that, yeah, we're doing it. We're the greatest activists. No, but we're doing something that's arming us and arms other people and will spark the inspirations of things that will create solutions. And I'm within my soul, I'm happy and moving towards being content with staying on the road to overcoming and conquering over white supremacy.
Thank you. Closing comments?
Oh, I can go. I think Yurugu is really like a life altering book for me personally to have read. I think that since I've read it, I've always had like feelings that the way that we existed were just like very incorrect, but Yurugu was like put everything succinctly and like just explained it so perfectly that I feel like I'm able to understand why our existence is so incorrect right now under white supremacy. I think the chapters that just, I mean, all of the chapters were amazing, but the ones that really blew me away was the ones about art or like aesthetic. I think that one completely changed my whole just like appreciation of art in general and like expression and like the beauty of humanity and people. And I think the intracultural behavior, I learned so much from that one, especially in terms of like the political landscape now and just the way that people I don't know, I think sometimes people try to say like white supremacy doesn't exist because maybe there's like white people also suffer under it and it's a lot of like gotcha type things. And I think that the intercultural chapter was just it added a lot of depth to like my understanding of how white people interact with each other, which is something that I don't think that I've ever really read. I've always read about how white people treat non-white people. So I really liked that a lot. And overall, I just think it's such a amazing book. I wish that there was like I mean, I like the conclusion because in a way, like she's just such an amazing writer that she like basically puts everything from the book into the conclusion and it flows so effortlessly and the points just like add on to each other, so it like reinforces everything you learned earlier. And I think you could even just read the conclusion as a standalone to give to someone to kind of just open up their understanding of like European cultural thought. I think this book is interesting because I know like the time that it was written, Black people, especially Black people in America, had more of a desire and connection to, or like a desire to want to be connected to their African roots. And I think we're like at a time now where there's a lot of big movements to have Black people in America to be rooted in America. And I'm wondering like how this book kind of stands within that moment, because it is a really interesting but kind of weird moment, like seeing people have like Black people have like American flags in their bios and stuff. It makes you think about Yurugu and what that book would mean to them if people even still have a connection to their African self. I think that those are most of my closing comments.
Thank you. Silent Warrior, would you like to share closing comments? Alrighty. Yeah, for me, very definitely a text I will be having to come back to refine my understanding of the Yurugu and exactly what sets us apart from the Yurugu. Reminded of the extensive portions on melanin that the book covers, and the behavior towards others, and how this book really does have the answers as to how and why the system is here, and it's very epic to get a very concise and clear understanding of how the system operates. And it's because everything within it, it's mythos, it's ideology, it's words, it's concepts, it's rules and regulations in regards to how people are supposed to react. It all contributes to the maintenance and maintaining of the system of racism and white supremacy. And when you have something that perpetuates itself like that, it definitely becomes a awesome machine, which is what the system is, a very awesome force of power unlike the world has ever seen. And this is this entity we are trying to replace with a system of justice, because although it's very powerful, although it gets a lot of things done, it's still a very, very incorrect and evil, vile system that no being should have to tolerate. So very, very important text. Happy that I have been able to study it with fellow attempted counter-racist scientists. And the Yurugu, very, very alarming text. That's it. It's very necessary and alarming information that could definitely be used to solve the problem.